Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast as we continue to work our way through this first week of June 2024. As we talked about in our first episode this week, a ton happening this month in Happy Valley. We will have prospect camps going on every single week. In fact, this Friday is the first of 3 straight Fridays that are going to feature a 7-on-7 tournament with high school programs from across the region, even beyond the region. And we'll get big man challenges that are coinciding with that. So we'll get defensive and offensive linemen doing their thing on a separate field here in Happy Valley. That's taking place all day Friday. We're back on the practice field Sunday for the traditional prospect camp setup. And you can catch all those live updates over at lions247.com. We'll have 60% off going through this Thursday. We're recording on a Thursday here. If you catch this episode by Thursday at midnight, you can still take advantage of that 60% off deal. If you've already joined our VIP club at Lions 24/7, then you're already well informed from Mr. Tyler Calvaruso on what's happening across the Penn State recruiting landscape. We bring him back on. You heard from him on Tuesday when that episode dropped, looking back at last week's official visitors. We're going to take it from a different perspective this time, looking ahead. Another batch of official visitors coming to campus. Who are the 7-on-7 participants and campers that you need to know about? We're going to break it all down right now with Mr. Calvaruso. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. It's a busy week, but it's a fun time, especially with the 7-on-7. I'm a big fan of the 7-on-7 tournaments. We got 3 straight coming up, so I'm looking forward to getting up there with you guys, seeing it with my own eyes. I like seeing those guys in that kind of competitive setting before their high school season kicks off. I think it's always pretty valuable. And then on the official visit front, bunch of top targets coming to town. Some of those other top targets are going off the board. So you're starting to see the official visit season, the craziness kind of pick up a little bit.
Yeah, 7-on-7 tournaments, always a blast, especially when you join us here in Happy Valley making the trip. You'll be doing that. I hope you are getting your creamery order ready because you are not a frequent visitor to State College. So I know that you got to get your ice cream while you visit us as well. You mentioned, over the years, getting a chance to see some people in action 7-on-7. I remember my first time covering this event. Micah Parsons was the tournament MVP, and he was actually in between his Penn State commitments. It was a bit of an awkward scenario that played out because a lot of us thought he was going to end up with the Ohio State Buckeyes, maybe the Alabama Crimson Tide, the Georgia Bulldogs, heck, even the Nebraska Cornhuskers at that point. He ended up getting that MVP trophy handed to him from James Franklin, and lo and behold, he ends up joining the class. And we've seen guys at Penn State didn't get, like Caleb Williams, an eventual number 1 overall NFL draft pick, come through and put up a really impressive performance in Penn State 7-on-7 back when he was a top target. So a lot of fun to come there. But let's begin with a couple updates, Tyler, regarding this 2025 Penn State class and their pursuit of new additions. A couple names that we've mentioned as targets lately, especially Grayson Littleton, a cornerback out of Tampa, Florida, that was on the official visit trip this past weekend. He's quickly off the board to Clemson, and you noted that he was making a midweek trip to Clemson on our last episode.
Yeah, this move surprised me a little bit. I felt that really throughout official visit season, Littleton was going to remain on the board because it seemed like he was pretty dead set on going through the entirety of his slate before coming to a decision. But alas, he makes it to Clemson. Tigers do a good job with him while he's on campus, get that one wrapped up. I thought Penn State gave itself a little bit of a lead coming out of its official visit last week. And I thought the Nittany Lions did a pretty good job with Littleton. It looked like he was a fit on and off the field with the program. So I thought Penn State had that working in its favor. But this one goes the other way. There are still plenty of top cornerback targets on the board for Terry Smith, and cornerback recruiting has gotten to the point where you kind of just have to trust what Terry Smith has going on. I think the past results and the previous results on the development front kind of speaks for themselves when it comes to not only getting guys on board and signed to Penn State, but what happens with them when they do get to campus in terms of their individual development and becoming impact players for Penn State. So I think all is still well for the Nittany Lions on the cornerback front. You hosted top target last weekend in Brandon Finney. Things are going well there. Got Jameer Joseph coming to town next weekend for an official visit. Things are also going well there. A couple other targets on the board as well. One's going to be in town this weekend. We'll get into him in a little bit. But things are still looking up at cornerback. But Littleton's a great player, and he's heading to Clemson. Clemson's getting a good one, I think.
And let's note, I mean, you can really note this at every position in the recruiting anymore, but the ability to backfill through the transfer portal and the ability to kind of retool your roster without relying on incoming freshmen out of high school. We've seen that at the cornerback spot for Penn State. Developmental guys like Johnny Dixon, who spends 3 years here, works his way from a reserve backup to a big-time starter. You see it with Davian Collins going from a guy who didn't play much at all last year to someone who's there's a ton of buzz around him now as a redshirt sophomore. And then, of course, AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber making their way from the SEC to that cornerback room via transfers this past offseason. So Grayson Littleton off the board going to Clemson. He's a top 100 overall talent in 24/7 Sports Assessment. Same goes for Zayden Walker, 5-star caliber player, top 10 caliber player, which is why it was such a big deal that the Shuey County standout from Georgia was planning on making a trip to Penn State and reciprocating the interest there. But he is also off the board, staying in his home state, committing to the Georgia Bulldogs. Both of these commitments occurred on Wednesday.
Yeah, this outcome didn't surprise me in the slightest, unlike Littleton. I wrote earlier in the week that, Penn State was good that it was getting the official visit. It was good that it was getting its chance. But the fact of the matter is it was always really a long shot for the Nittany Lions. I would have been stunned if he didn't wind up at one of Georgia or South Carolina. And Georgia's the one that gets this one done. Walker would have been one hell of a get for the staff. But I think the writing was kind of on the wall with this one. And Georgia picks up the commitment. Walker's no longer traveling to campus for his visit.
So just a couple updates there, not necessarily of the friendly variety for Penn State football fans, but we have a lot to dive into here with this upcoming official visit weekend. And there's a bunch of uncommitted guys. Big theme of the next official visit weekend, which will start June 14th, is going to be the presence of committed recruits here on campus. We've confirmed a bunch of those. But this one has a different kind of feel, Tyler, where we're seeing a lot of those familiar names that we've discussed for weeks, months, sometimes years even, coming to campus at a really important juncture of their recruitments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for a lot of these guys, it's kind of crunch time in a sense, right? After this weekend, we're going to be midway through the official visit slate. We're going to be midway through official visit season. Guys are going to be at least 2 visits into their schedule. And in some cases, decisions are going to be made. When you look at the list for this weekend, there are multiple top targets, on both sides of the ball. You got top 24/7 wide receivers. You got top targets in the secondary on defense. It's really just a jam-packed weekend for Penn State. And, what better place to start than with Kanoa Winston? He's going to be, Penn State, we mentioned the 7-on-7 tournament on Friday. Gonzaga is participating. It's sounding like Winston is going to be part of that. Official visit rules per the NCAA are their staff is not allowed to evaluate you if the school is paying for your travel. That's why a lot of guys who we saw it last year, actually, with Peter Gonzalez, he didn't participate in the 7-on-7 with Central Catholic while he was there on his official visit to Penn State. Now, God, granted, Penn State didn't pay for his travel, given a local product, but then, Winston has the ability to come to campus on his own and participate if he wishes to do so. It sounds like that's going to happen. So we're going to get an eye on him. But when it comes to his recruitment, Michigan has, put together a lot of positive momentum in its favor. And I think that the Nittany Lions are going to have to withstand that this weekend. And I think that they're in a good spot to do so. When you look at Winston's recruitment, he's been to State College a ton, right? He's been to Happy Valley, probably more than anywhere in this process. I have to go back and double check the numbers on that, but I believe that to be the case. Obviously, there is plenty of familiarity with the staff, given KJ Winston's development under Anthony Poindexter. That is a big feather in Penn State's cap. And really, he's comfortable with the program at this point. He's comfortable with the staff. He's comfortable with State College as a place. This official visit is really just about diving into the depths of it and figuring out, kind of like last weekend with Brandon Finney and some of the feedback we received on that regard, is this really the place for me? I think that's kind of what Kanoa Winston is trying to gather out of this visit the most. Michigan, again, I want to come back to the Wolverines because they jumped in this picture maybe a little bit later than Penn State, but they've come on really, really strong, and they're a legitimate contender in this recruitment. Wolverines have momentum right now. Penn State is going to get its chance, and I think it still has a pretty good one. I think that the staff is built to weather this storm and give Winston a really good official visit. They're definitely going to prioritize making sure that happens, putting on a great show for him, and reminding him that State College is the place for him to be.
Winston, a name that I think everyone's very familiar with by now. Of course, his cousin has All-American potential at the safety position for Penn State as a junior, has been developing some buzz as a potential draft prospect down the road as well. But the wide receiver spot, it would seem, is also very much in focus for this weekend. In terms of who you feel that Penn State enters this weekend, maybe leading for, does anyone fit that qualifier for wide receiver, or is it more of the doing well with?
I think it's more of the doing well with. The thing is, so we got, there are two receivers standing out to me in this regard. We'll start with Jeff Exner, the 4-star from McDonough. It seems like the appropriate place to start given the work that Penn State does at McDonough and all the ties at that program. Penn State has been involved in Exner's recruitment since he was an underclassman, when a lot of people thought he was going to be an edge rusher at the next level. So his recruitment, it's been an eventful one to cover in terms of, positional projection and where exactly he's going to fit in at the next level. Penn State has stuck with him. It's been with him since the start. Has hosted him a ton of times, ton of familiarity with the staff. When it became clear that he was going to be a wide receiver at the next level, and once Marcus Hagans got into town as Penn State's wide receiver coach, those two got to work on building a good relationship. That has come together nicely for Penn State. And, of course, Kenny Sanders' involvement in this whole process. That is someone that Jeff Exner can trust beyond football. That's someone he has a relationship beyond the field and a relationship that predates his time as a college football prospect. So not really any other school has that to offer in this recruitment. That's a really tight-knit relationship as a family friend. So Penn State does have multiple things working in its favor with Exner. But I just want to reiterate, I think, what I've been saying with him really since I got the chance to catch up with him at Under Armour Next Camp in Baltimore last month. Virginia Tech is very much in this mix. When I talked to Exner, he told me he was looking to commit after the first 2 weeks of June. So at that point, it was going to be his 3 official visits would have been Virginia Tech in April. He was there for Virginia Tech's spring game, and that went very well. Michigan State last weekend and Penn State this weekend. The Michigan State visit wound up not happening. Checked in with sources. That sounded like a mutual decision where Michigan State was seeking a little bit different of a skill set at wide receiver in its 2025 class. And at that point, why waste each other's time? Things just going in a different direction. So now you look at it, and if Exner sticks to that original timeline that he told me, it's looking like Penn State or Virginia Tech in terms of the two schools battling it out. Syracuse is on the official visit schedule beyond that time frame. So is Maryland. But again, if we're sticking with that time frame, it sounded like it's going to come down to Penn State and Tech. I'm not sleeping on Virginia Tech at all in this recruitment, but Penn State's going to have a chance to win this one over the weekend. They're also going to have a chance to win one with a top 24/7 prospect in Matthew Alton. I just outlined everything I know about Exner's recruitment. Some of that came directly from him. Alton does not necessarily do as much talking, so it's kind of a little bit more difficult to get some intel directly from the source. But those at Penn State feel optimistic about its chances with Alton. He was at Syracuse last weekend, has Virginia Tech next weekend. Then it's going to be Maryland for him to round out his official visit slate per the reporting of our Brian Doan, who does a great job in the region, as everyone listening probably already knows. And I just feel that given the way this recruitment has played out, given some of the feedback that we have received, Penn State does have a chance to get this one done this weekend. I don't think it's a crazy thought. I really don't. I think the staff has pushed a lot of the right buttons with Alton, and it's definitely a priority for the staff this weekend. I mentioned putting on a show for Winston. They want to put one on for Alton as well and let him know, hey, look, Penn State, this is the place you need to be. This is the place we're going to get to the next level, and we're going to do right by you. I think that's going to be a huge part of the pitch this weekend. We're going to see what comes out of it. But he's one of those top names on the board for Marcus Hagans, and he really has been since the winter. When he got back and visited for his junior day in January after picking up an offer from Penn State during the fall, that's when things really started to progress and pick up here, and now it leads us up to this point.
And this is another example of a Virginia high school standout receiver with Marcus Hagans having that shot. We know Marcus Hagans, a decade plus down there in Charlottesville helping recruit that territory, a guy who's played at that school. There really shouldn't be many schools that Marcus Hagans is a stranger at in the state of Virginia at this point. We'll see if he can make some moves here with Alton, who's a top 200 overall recruit overall. And then Jeff Exner is a 4-star in his own right. And I really quickly wanted to circle back to a storyline there. I know it was brought up on our message board this week as well. Exner out of McDonough, clearly someone they'd like to add at the receiver position in this recruiting class. And then Brandon Finney out of McDonough, clearly someone they'd like to add at the cornerback position to this recruiting class. And Finney was on campus last week for his official visit. You've talked a lot about how Terry Smith has done a great job selling development to him. There's some Joey Porter Jr. Comparisons that have been made. How are these two recruits compared and contrasted in your mind? Because I think a lot of people are going to say, well, the McDonough pipeline is there for Penn State, but we haven't seen a lot of multi-target cycles where this comes into play. So are we talking package deal, or are we talking guys that are operating on two different wavelengths?
They're on a different path, I would say. They're both – I wouldn't necessarily say they're looking for different things, because a lot of them – or both of them have been pretty consistent in a lot of the same qualities what they're looking for out of a school. But the recruitments are very different in a sense, because I already touched on with Exner. He's been on the board as a legitimate power conference prospect really since his freshman sophomore year. Programs have known about Jeff Exner for a really long time. That kind of makes him a veteran of the recruiting process at this point. Can't say the same for Brandon Finney. His blow-up did not occur until following his junior season. The winter is when it really started, heading into the spring. That's when all of these offers have rolled in. So in comparison to Exner, given the level of experience he has, Finney's kind of a rookie when it comes to this whole recruiting thing. He's still getting out, learning about the process, learning about all these schools. He knows what he wants in a program, but at the same time, he's trying to figure out what exactly these programs can provide to him in that regard. So, those two have plenty of familiarity. They're friends. I'm sure they've had conversations along the lines of, wouldn't it be awesome if we wound up at the same spot the next level? I'm sure stuff like that has happened behind the scenes. But is that, an active, ongoing discussion about teaming up the next level? I don't believe so, just given the individual point where both of them are in their respective processes. Now, for Penn State, I think they're doing well with both, so that's a plus for the Nittany Lions.
Just a reminder, I know almost everybody who listens to this show regularly would know the McDonough pipeline, but for those who don't, we're talking P.J. Mustipher, Devon Elise, Curtis Jacobs, Dennis Sutton, Mason Robinson, who's a second-year player, took a red shirt last year, but a lot of history, especially on the defensive side of the football. And then you mentioned Kenny Sanders, who's one of the very trusted recruiting coordinators here at Penn State. That is his alma mater, and he's done some really good things for them when it comes time to target guys from that program. So, okay, interesting take there from you on that tandem out of McDonough. You, though, actually led your early preview for this official visit with a different defensive prospect from Ohio when you said, who does Penn State lead for? Explain your logic behind this one.
Before I explain my logic on that, I just kind of want to jump in with a little bit of live breaking news.
Okay.
So Keandre Barker yesterday was at Arkansas for a camp, and there had been some buzz about Barker potentially flipping to the Razorbacks and, potentially not winding up in Penn State's 2025 class. It's sounding like that at this point is not going to be the case. Barker just tweeted out a statement reaffirming his commitment to the Nittany Lions, saying he's 110% locked in with Penn State. Actually got a graphic made for that while he was at it. So for any Penn State fans who might have been concerned about the status of Keandre Barker, where he was heading in his recruitment, you can breathe a little bit easier now because it's looking like he's sticking with the Nittany Lions. So there you go.
Hold on. We'll do some live analysis here, because I honestly, until about 90% of the way through what you were saying there, was about to say, okay, now they're down to a 2 running back class. But no, they still, as of now, have 3 running backs. I thought you were going to take that in a different direction because of what had kind of been brewing, it seemed, between Arkansas and between Barker. What do you make of this? Because I think you've been saying for a while that both him and Alvin Henderson, who joined the class not so long ago, but has a pretty serious history with Auburn, and that relationship seems to continue. You've been saying that those are 2 that we're going to have to watch closely all the way through signing day, whereas Tyke Hayes here in the state of Pennsylvania feels more of a sure thing in this class. What's your reaction to this affirmation that he's putting out there publicly? And how sure are you that the 3-man class that is currently constructed for Penn State at running back will be the same running back class that we're talking about in late December?
We'll see. I think that's probably the best way to put this point. With Barker, I think if you're a Penn State fan, it's nice to see him come out and reinforce that he is locked in with the program. This is something that's been going on behind the scenes for a little bit now, because he had been slated for an official visit to Arkansas this weekend, as a matter of fact. And he's back in his home state of Arkansas to play his senior season. And, the buzz was there, and it was getting kind of louder and louder by the day. But I think Penn State took care of what it needs to take care of here behind the scenes to get Barker completely on board. I think with Henderson, it's probably, we're going to continue watching him And he's already made the visit to Auburn, so it's definitely possible he continues to make more visits. Official visit weekend for the commits, it's going to be an important time for Penn State to kind of further solidify things with him, get him even more locked in with Penn State than he already is as a commit. So we'll be keeping a close eye on both moving forward, just given the fluidity of everything. But Barker seems to be, he knows where he wants to be at this point. I think Henderson's probably still feeling things out a little bit, but he's still committed to Penn State as of now. So you got to take that for what it's worth.
All right. Live update here on the podcast, a recorded podcast, but a live update from Tyler Cavaruso on the running back position. And you mentioned that weekend with the commits. There's going to be some dynamics in play there. A lot of these guys haven't spent much time together. Maybe some of them have mentally drifted toward other programs since committing to Penn State. This can be a chance to kind of get everybody on the same footing. I know, speaking with Beckham Kritza this week, coming off of his latest visit to campus, he thinks it's going to be a great opportunity, not just to get everybody together and get that family vibe going, but the uncommitted targets who are going to be around them to start pushing them towards the finish line and maybe joining the class. And a lot more from Kritza, by the way, over at Lions247.com on his interactions with quarterback coach Danny O'Brien, new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, and then Drew Aller, who we referred to as a big brother type for him. So a lot on an article that we posted Wednesday at Lions247.com for our VIP subscribers. Let's reset it and refocus in and on this official visit weekend that's coming, because as I alluded to before, we were taking down a different path at running back. Penn State has a defensive back making a trip from Ohio. He's been here before, and you feel really optimistic about where the Nittany Lions stand in his recruitment. And maybe this is one of those final moments that convinces him this is the right fit.
Yeah, Josh Johnson from Ironton High, he's been around a bunch. He was just on campus last month. He made it back out for an unofficial visit leading up to his official. And when it comes to Josh Johnson, one of the big things with him from the Penn State perspective is the versatility that he has to offer in the secondary. We touched on this a little bit, talking about last weekend's official visits with Antonio Branch. Josh Johnson offers a lot of the same versatility with his ability to play cornerback and safety. Penn State likes him more at cornerback at this juncture, but he has the ability to go out there and play safety at a high level, at a Big Ten level. At that seems to be the feeling surrounding Johnson, and his versatility is a big selling point when it comes to the potential for him to join this class. I think Penn State is on top for Johnson at this point. He has spoken so highly of the program, the staff, everything that he has to offer. He was at Louisville last week for an official. That seemingly went well. Iowa's going to get a chance with him. Hawkeyes have been involved in his recruitment for a while as well. I think Iowa, given its reputation defensively and what it accomplishes, you always need to keep that in the back of your mind when evaluating a prospect's official visit slate. But I think Penn State is on top with Johnson. I think it has a real chance with him this weekend. We'll see how things go. Because remember, even during these official visit weekends, the boards are fluid. And it's not just the prospect evaluating the school and it's his fit at the school. It's the staff evaluating the prospect and his fit at the program as well. You already have a general feel of how a guy fits in at your program at this point of the cycle, this late in the game. But sometimes the official visit can tell a story. So we'll see what comes about coming out of this weekend. But I do like where things are with Johnson right now.
A couple defensive linemen get to. The big kind of name for us on our first episode this week was Max Granville, and kind of the way you framed it was Penn State really did itself some favors with this edge rusher target out of Texas. He's got more visits looming, but they sent him with a lot to consider about the Nittany Lions. And we've got some non-region defensive linemen coming in more for Deion Barnes to work on here face-to-face. And I'm going to throw them both your way. Tell me how maybe these recruitments are a little bit different. You've got a top 24/7 edge rusher and Jaden Woods out of Kansas making the trip. And then Jarquez Carter, a defensive tackle from Florida coming up. He's a 4-star caliber prospect. What do we need to know about these guys?
Well, one thing, and I feel like this is probably the best place to start because we just got done talking about boards and, who fits where and at what positions guys fit. Both of these guys, Penn State would like to have them in its 2025 recruiting class. I wrote earlier this week, looking to gain a little bit more clarity on Woods standing on the board compared to some others. Penn State will welcome him on board if State College, he decides that's where he wants to be. Same goes for Carter. I think both are in kind of different parts of their recruitment. Carter's coming off an official visit to Florida, and I checked in with sources familiar with that process. Feeling as the Gators have a little bit of an edge there coming out of the official, but he's continuing his slate really with an open mind. So it seems like he's a little bit further off on the decision. He's going to be getting to Miami. He's going to be getting to UCF. Ohio State is a big one to monitor with Jarquez Carter, but he has a good relationship with Deion Barnes. That is essentially what led to this official visit, getting locked in. He was around during spring practice. Visit went well. It was actually a multi-day stay for him. So things came together nicely there on that front for Penn State. So Carter's one of the more important prospects visiting this weekend. And then with Jaden Woods, you got to remember there is plenty of trust there going back to the days where James Franklin was at Kansas State recruiting Jaden's father to the Wildcats. So he has known that family for a really long time. There's a lot of familiarity between the two sides. Penn State likes Woods' skill set. And again, another situation where a good relationship with Deion Barnes has been formed. Woods was just like Carter. Woods was around during spring practice, got a better feeling for Penn State, got a better feeling for the duo of Barnes and Torrance Brown, who works closely with Barnes, just like Barnes used to do with John Scott. So that's the role that Torrance Brown works in, and he does a pretty good job. Woods sounds like he's liking both of those guys. He's liking Penn State. I've talked to people who wouldn't necessarily be surprised if Woods winds up sticking in the Midwest at a place like Wisconsin or Purdue. So we're going to have to see what comes about on that front. He's already been at Wisconsin for an official visit. He's going to be at Purdue for an official visit next weekend. So Penn State is in a strong spot with Woods right now. I think the Midwest schools are getting a really long look for him as well. But if Penn State, if Woods says, hey, look, Penn State's where I want to be, he'll have a spot in this class.
Looking long distance as well, a couple names out of Mater Dei High School, a perennial powerhouse in Southern California. Darius Dixon, a defensive back, and then Phillip Bell, a wide receiver, both highly coveted out of the Mater Dei program. Terry Smith has done a pretty great job over the years of getting guys to campus from that region. We haven't seen a lot of that reflected in the final recruiting classes come signing day, but you get a crack at a couple good ones here.
You do. And I think that, anytime I look at these West Coast recruitments, you kind of have to think logistically, what are the odds of Penn State going out on the West Coast and pulling a guy? It's tough. It's not easy.
Hold on. You mean Big Ten territory?
Yeah, I have to take that into account now.
It's just Big Ten territory. It's just part of the neighborhood now, man.
That's what I got to say now. Yeah, the guys, it's good. I like to say a recruitment has a certain sort of flavor. Now we can say when a kid is considering Washington and USC and Oregon, it's got a Big Ten flavor to it. That's new for me. But it's just with both of these guys, if you look at their lists and you look at where they're officially visiting and you look at the schools who are high on their list, these two might be a little bit more open to leaving the region than maybe some other West Coast prospects Penn State has gone after. Got to start with Darius Dixon, the top 100 corner from Mater Dei. Cali powerhouse, national powerhouse. Back when I was at USA Today doing the high school rankings, always at the top of those rankings, or at least very, very close to it. So the pedigree of that program speaks to itself. Long history of developing top flight cornerbacks. Dixon, the latest in that regard. He was at Washington for an official visit last weekend. Seems like the Huskies set a little bit of a tone with him there. That visit seemed to play out nicely. But Terry Smith was out on the West Coast during the spring contact period. Got a good feel for Dixon. Things went well there. Proceeded to lock in an official visit. And I think Penn State had, I don't want to say, obviously they have a legitimate chance since he's taking the visit. But I think what will be the telltale sign of Penn State's chances with Dixon coming out of the weekend will be, just the feedback that we get from him in his camp. How receptive is he really to playing on the East Coast as a West Coast product? I mentioned his list and, the possibility he leaves the region. He does have Tennessee on his official visit schedule. He's going to be in Knoxville for an official with the Vols next weekend. But again, going to the Northeast, playing in Pennsylvania, it's still a little bit different than going down south and playing in Tennessee as a West Coast kid. So if Dixon is open to leaving the region, I think Penn State's going to get a long look. I think Tennessee's going to get a long look. Washington, though, got to give the Huskies credit. I think they've done some really good things with Dixon, who's checking in as the, I believe, number 11 corner in the 2025 class. So high-level prospect that Terry Smith, again, has the Nittany Lions strongly in the running for. Then on the other side of the ball, wide receiver, you got Mississippi Viejo standout Phillip Bell. There's a USC crystal ball in for Bell. It's a little bit of an not outdated pick since the Trojans are still doing pretty well with him and are going to get an official visit from him at the end of official visit season. But it's been in there for a while, and there have been a lot of developments in Bell's recruitment since. Ohio State has done a really good job with Bell. He has a good relationship with Brian Hartline. Tennessee's going to get a midweek official visit from Bell. That staff's doing a good job with him. I think Hagan has done a good job with Bell as well. I see this one as a little bit longer of a shot for Penn State than I do Dixon, which might come across as kind of surprising given Dixon popped up a little bit later in the cycle as a legitimate target for Penn State and, a high priority target at that for Penn State. Bell's been on the board in that regard a little bit longer. But looking at the list, sorting through some of the intel, getting a feel for the way these two recruitments have played out, it's going to be tough with both. They're both going to be tough polls. But if I had to handicap it of which one I thought had a better chance of landing at Penn State, I'd probably go with Dixon right now. But Penn State's still done a good job with Bell, and they're going to get its chance with them this weekend.
Yeah, thanks for correcting me. Mater Dei is where you'll find Bell. I called them a tandem.
No, you're right. Bell's at Mission Viejo.
But I'm sorry, yeah, Bell's at Mission Viejo. I called them a tandem from Mater Dei. So my bad there. Yeah, that's okay. I'm getting
those Cali powers,
my powerhouse schools from Cali mixed up. But yeah, big time programs they're represented in Penn State's official visitors list. What would you consider maybe the wild card of this official visit weekend in terms of player or scenario? The way you discussed Amori Hills, the offensive lineman who plays ball in Baltimore, we saw him at camp on Sunday. You talked about him a bit on Tuesday. We're still seeing what sorts out with the offensive line class. Does he fit that bill?
Maybe. Like I said, I think there's going to be a lot of evaluating of him.
That's what I'm saying. I guess, does he fit that wild card label? I mean, is he somebody that maybe we don't have a real good clarity on right now, and maybe we will come Sunday evening, Monday morning?
I think I do kind of like him in that category when you put it like that, because his recruitment has been kind of quiet in general. He hasn't been talked about a whole lot. He hasn't done a whole lot of talking. I know you got the chance to catch up with him. I think you might have been one of the first people he caught up with during his recruitment this late in the game.
We appreciate, and again, you can kind of tell he's at a situation where he's got this visit to Penn State, he's got visits planned to Maryland and Virginia Tech. But he's also kind of experiencing this in live time, hasn't had a year to digest these scenarios and kind of do his homework on everything. And so he's open to the possibilities of more official visits, although he did tell me he's targeting a July commitment announcement, which obviously, abbreviates your timeline and your opportunity to go explore.
It does. And I think if all goes well and things come together this weekend, it could move quickly. There's just no guarantee that happens in that regard. Up until 9 a.m. this morning, I might have highlighted Nolan Davenport as a potential wild card for the weekend, but he's not even making the visit anymore. He just committed to Wisconsin about 10 minutes ago. So you can throw that one out the window. I put it on the Lions 24/7 board, on the Lions Pride board this morning, that Penn State was no longer expecting him for his official visit, and now he is off the board to a Big Ten rival. So
this is how June works, people. This is how June works now. We're just it's gonna be official visit weekend list that you see on Monday. Make sure you check back in Friday, because some of those guys can be committed elsewhere, and you might have guys pop up on that list late in the week. And we're still monitoring some situations that we're not quite comfortable to talk about right now on the podcast. But between now and Saturday morning, Friday evening, keep tabs at Lions247.com. There might be some interesting additions to this group.
You took the words right out of my mouth, man. If you want a prime example of how fluid and how quickly things can move during official visit season, look no further than the conversation that we just had. Rashad Johnson is maybe the last potential wild card of the weekend. Safety recruiting, we already touched on Winston. Jadon Blair is a big-time target for Penn State. Braswell Thomas from New Jersey has kind of burst onto the scene here.
How about that? Big camp performance on Sunday. This is a guy who was highly rated early on. He's from my neck of the woods, and no one comes from my neck of the woods and plays Power 4 football. And all of a sudden, he's resurfaced in a pretty resounding way.
Yeah, and I've heard some very, very positive feedback regarding what he accomplished at Penn State over the weekend. Testing numbers are where they need to be. The measurables are where they need to be. There is a kind of general feeling that Braswell Thomas still has a lot of good football in the tank, and that's something Anthony Poindexter could potentially tap into down the road. He's got an official visit lined up for that final weekend of June. Johnson's going to be on campus this weekend. He was just at Louisville for an official visit, and this is going to be only his second trip to campus. He visited Penn State for the first time in the spring. Penn State was keeping a close eye on him throughout his junior season. It was one of those ones that didn't get a ton of attention or write-up from us, because, that evaluation process is always ongoing, and you don't know where exactly things are going to wind up depending on how that process plays out. But Penn State ultimately liked Johnson's junior season film, and he's going to be on campus. And, those Florida guys, they have a tendency to surprise on the recruiting trail. Kind of reminds you of Antonio Branch. Antonio Branch was less of a surprise because I had a good feel for where Penn State was at in his process. But with Johnson, maybe the Nittany Lions maybe could solidify themselves as his top school this weekend. He's got a couple other official visits lined up as well. I mentioned he was at Louisville, so I'm not sure where exactly his line of thinking is in terms of a commitment timeline. I'm hoping to gain some insight into that throughout the weekend. But I think he kind of falls into wild card status as well.
Tremendous stuff on these upcoming official visitors. Really appreciate that, Tyler. Again, if you're following our VIP coverage, you've got a lot more detail involved over there. And as we get some feedback throughout the weekend, you'll find it at Lions 24/7. Brian Doan, obviously, going to be playing a big role in that coverage once again. And I don't think we mentioned here in the podcast, Brian Doan. I know he's got a lot of people who love him and what he does for Penn State recruiting and the coverage and all that. He just signed an extension, just announced that with 24/7 Sports and CBS. So we're going to be calling him a teammate for further down the road, which is fantastic news for us at Lions 24/7 and the 24/7 Sports Network. We'll have him on the podcast once again. But Brian, one of the truly best in the business, kind of a legendary figure. He's been doing it for decades now, and we're happy to have him in such a huge role with what we do in our Penn State coverage. Tyler, let's switch gears a little bit and go from the official visits that are about to transpire to all of the camp action that's about to go down here in Happy Valley. As I said earlier, you, myself, Team Brennan, we'll be out there. We'll be on the field Friday for 7-on-7 tournament action, which is also going to be a big man challenge camp, defensive linemen, offensive linemen competing with one another from different schools. And then we're back on the field at Penn State practice facilities Sunday for the second elite showcase prospect camp of the summer, which we have a pretty good list brewing right now. And we're going to talk about some of the anticipated visitors and what we're looking forward to from the experience. Check back in early next week with our next podcast episode for some analysis of these guys once we get eyeballs on them. But we've got to begin with the 7-on-7 tournament on the commit side, right? And that's Deshaun Burnett. And we had Brian Doan on quickly after his commitment from Amani Christian Academy out in the Pittsburgh area. And Brian talked about, does he stick at linebacker? Is he a guy that grows into an edge rusher? What do you think? What do you make of that part of his prospect profile right now? And I'd imagine we're going to be seeing him, do a little bit of everything in this situation, covering the pass. And you're not going to get a chance to really see, unless the question here is if he goes over the big man challenge. And that's kind of, some guys double dip, but I'd imagine we see him on the 7-on-7 side of things.
Yeah, you're going to see him on the 7-on-7 side of things. He does pretty much everything for Amani Christian. So if he did make it over the big man challenge somehow, some way, I think that'd be a pretty impressive.
Like 3 reps on the edge. Just give it like 3 one-on-one reps and then go back and play more 7-on-7.
Yeah, jog back and play some quarterback and receiver for Amani Christian. Whatever he's got to do, he'll do. That's what he does for that program, man. His athletic profile is something we really preached throughout his process, and we're going to get the chance to see it on Friday. And, again, since he committed, Burnett's been locked in. He's been a nice part of this class. Again, versatility, has the ability to play linebacker, could grow into an edge. I feel like edge is probably the preferred destination for him at this point. When I look at these boards and when I have conversations with those who, have an idea of what's going on with Penn State recruiting, edge is what comes up for Deshaun Burnett. So I think that we might not see it on Friday. Maybe we see it a little bit later in the summer in an individual camp setting. But as for Friday, I think we're gonna get to see Deshaun Burnett in a little bit different of a capacity, which I'm kind of excited for. I've always heard about what he does offensively. I've never seen him in person, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, he's somebody that I'm excited to see too. 7-on-7, you like I talked about earlier with Micah Parsons. I think we saw Micah Parsons play 9 different roles in a 7-on-7 tournament between the two sides of the football that day. At quarterback, this is obviously probably the easiest spot to focus in on during 7-on-7. Last year, the talk of the town that day, and last summer at quarterback was Matt Zollers, who stepped up, delivered some big time throws in that competitive atmosphere. And he ended up getting an offer from Ricky Ronnie, former Penn State offensive coordinator from Old Dominion. We were like, oh, that's nice. Good for the guy. We didn't think that Penn State would end up in a dogfight and end up seeing him go to an SEC program at the end of the day. But that's where it was. And so there's going to be a chance for guys to step up and show what they've got from the passing skills perspective on Friday. 2026 quarterback Samaj Beals has been a name to know in the Philadelphia region for a while now. He's at Roman Catholic High School. Good size to him already, listed at 6'2", 175 pounds as a rising junior. Bunch of Power 4 opportunities. What is he kind of on the top of your board in terms of quarterbacks that we're going to get a chance to evaluate on Friday? And by the way, he does have a Penn State offer on that list.
I'd say so. I feel like he's definitely going to be one of the better quarterbacks in attendance. When you look at the list for this weekend and you look at these standout prospects coming to Penn State for this 7-on-7 tournament, there's a lot of good talent at the skill positions. There's some good names going to be on that big man challenge. Quarterback, I don't want to say it's barren because it's definitely not barren. You have some talented passers out there for that 7-on-7 tournament. But Beals kind of stands head and shoulders above that bunch. Now, he's coming off a multi-day visit to Colorado, maybe a little bit of jet lag from him out there on the field. He was looking forward to getting out to Boulder, check in with Deion Sanders, get a feel for that program. Now he's going to be back in a place where he was plenty familiar with the staff. He was just in town during May. He was there for the Elite 11 weekend. And really at this point, it's kind of in a situation where his recruitment, kind of like Diabell's, it is carried across multiple offensive coordinators now. So he's gotten to know 2 different OCs, 2 different systems, and getting a feel for how he fits in both of those systems. And my conversations with Beals, he says he feels like he could be a guy in Kotelnicki's system. There are some other 2026 quarterbacks higher on the board, which I highlighted this morning over at Lions 24/7. But Beals remains very much in the conversation. I'll definitely be keeping a close eye on him throughout tomorrow.
Highly encourage our VIP subscribers to check out Tyler's article from Thursday morning examining the quarterback dominoes in the 2026 class. We spent a lot of time lately on Beckham Kritza and what he means for the 2025 quarterback class and whether or not they'll maybe add a second passer to that group. But we've also, started to spend more time in that 2026 group, and Tyler shed a lot of light as there's been movement nationally with some of the bigger names in that class. Tyler, Monty Christian is going to bring more than just the Deshaun Burnett. It's a talented squad. They've got a few guys with 24/7 sports profiles. So David Davis is a name that you have highlighted here. Gabe Jenkins as well. Where are these guys in their recruitments? Davis is a 2026 guy. Jenkins younger, 27. But clearly, when you've got the commit there already, the familiarity is going to be placed between the staffs. And if somebody is worthy of picking up an offer from Amani Christian, Penn State's probably going to extend it.
I think with Davis, I know he's going to be one of Penn State's top targets in the 2026 class when it comes to in-state priorities. I think he has a high opinion of Penn State at this point in his program. I still think he's very far away from a point where he wants to bring an end to things. He's got some quality power for offers elsewhere, but he's given Penn State a really long look early in his process. Jenkins as a 27, definitely further out, but another guy who's really interested in Penn State early in his process. Davis, you're going to get a look at him at running back. He does some work in the secondary as well. Jenkins is more of a corner and a safety. So we're going to get to see these guys in action in a multitude of ways, and you can best believe the Penn State staff is going to be keeping a really close eye on those 2.
One more name to get to from that 7-on-7 list that we expect to get looks at. Gonzaga has always come up. It's a premier program from Washington, D.C. I remember when a young offensive lineman wearing glasses was doing the big man challenge, hopping around, pushing around. He turned into an All-American, Olu Fashanu. He was wearing his purple Gonzaga gear that day during the big man challenge. Over in the 7-on-7 side of things, we saw Caleb Williams show up one time with Gonzaga gear. He's an eventual Heisman Trophy winner and #1 NFL draft pick. This time, it seems the name to know from that school in 7-on-7 play is Kedrick Golston, one of the top linebackers in the 2026 class, number 14 nationally at that position in 24/7 Sports Assessment. What do we need to know about his recruitment? What do we need to know about the recruit? We've got him listed 6'2", 235 pounds. That's some serious size for a guy who's got 2 high school seasons ahead.
Kedrick Golston, he's been to Penn State, and I think one of the most interesting elements with him this weekend is during these 7-on-7 tournaments, Penn State has the ability to go to the side and test these guys and get their updated height and weight and all of their measurables. They have the opportunity to do that with the guys who are high on their board. Golston's probably a guy that will be doing that because he is under consideration for an offer. You mentioned the size. Does he grow into an edge rusher? Does he grow, or does his growth kind of go stagnant and he stays at linebacker at his current size? I think that's all in the cards. I know Penn State likes him as a prospect. They like the upside there with him overall. Again, he's been to campus. He was on campus April 4th, so he picked up a little bit of familiarity with the program that day. Another edge rusher from Gonzaga who I wanted to touch on is Carter Meadows. He's a top 24/7 prospect in that 26 class, borderline top 100 guy. Already has an offer from Penn State, and he's going to be camping for the staff on Friday. Well, he's going to be participating in the Big Man Challenge. And, when I mentioned some quality names in the trenches, Meadows is probably the headliner of that group.
All right, we talked about that 7-on-7 tournament. We'll get a chance to follow our coverage over at Lions 24/7 from Friday late morning on and through the afternoon. So check that out. We'll have video from the different highlights. We'll have a bunch of photos. It's also an opportunity to see those official visitors show up. They tend to arrive later in the afternoon on golf carts with their host coaches and different players. So a lot going on to monitor on Friday. It'll be the same on Sunday. Just kind of quickly going through that anticipated list of campers for Sunday. Who stands out to you right at the top?
I wrote earlier this week that's kind of going to be the camp of the offensive linemen here for Penn State. There are a bunch of standouts in the trenches going to be there, man. Carter Scruggs, top 24/7 prospect from Virginia. He headlines the group. And he has been very clear to me early in his process that Penn State is one of his top options. I think that right now in his process, he's still very open, and you're kind of seeing that with his camp schedule. He was at Notre Dame, he was at Clemson, and while he might be open and he's still evaluating all of his options, I feel that Penn State has put its best foot forward with him so far and is doing quite well early on. Then you have another offered in-state standout in the 26th class in Brendan Alexander. He's more of an interior offensive lineman. He's got a bunch of early Power 4 offers. Coatesville area, they've got a guy in the 2027 class in Maxwell Hiller. He's got an offer from Penn State, multiple other Power 4 offers. He's going to be a guy that we are talking about for an extended period of time. Was back on campus last month during that Elite 11 All-22 region. He's loving the Nittany Lions so far right now. So that's going to be a really close storyline to monitor. I'm excited to watch him camp and work out in person this weekend. I think beyond the trenches, you've got guys like Jacob Weatherspoon popping up. He's a 4-star prospect from Ohio who actually just picked up an Ohio State offer on, I believe it was Wednesday. And he likes the Buckeyes, but he likes Penn State a lot too. Nittany Lions offer last month. Terry Smith already putting in a lot of work there with the speedster. He's a track star out in Ohio. Penn State staff likes the upside and the potential and the testing numbers there. Another guy, kind of like last offseason, they got Elbert Hill up to camp. They're looking forward to seeing what Weatherspoon can do. And if you look at the rest of this camp list, I mean, a lot of intriguing skill guys too. Chase Enlow's a composite 4-star running back who does not yet have an offer from Penn State, but he could pick one up if he tests well and performs well during camp. Ben Whitver is a wide receiver from Virginia who does have an offer from Penn State, and he just picked one up from Old Dominion. I think he's kind of popping up more on these FBS radars now, and he's a really good prospect. I saw it with my own eyes at Under Armour Baltimore. The hands are good. The route running is good. He's very smooth and fluid. Penn State staff will have the chance to see that on Sunday.
And he's teammates with Matt Henderson. He's teammates with Matt Henderson, who's Penn State's a tight end commit in the 2025 class. And by the way, Chase Enlow, the running back from the Hun School in Princeton, which is the same program that produced third-round NFL draft pick Caden Wallace, 4-year starter here. So just some connections involved too.
You mentioned Caden Wallace. Just before we move on with Whitford, when Ty Howell went down to evaluate Matt Henderson, it wasn't just Henderson who caught his eye. Ben Whitver was very much in that conversation too. You bring up Caden Wallace, that reminds me, I got to touch on one last offensive lineman, Leighton Von Brandt from Delaware. He's a prospect that you have gotten the chance to catch up with. He has an early offer from Penn State. He is going to be camping for the Penn State staff on Sunday as well. 2027 prospect to know, just like Hiller.
All right, Tyler, a lot to monitor. We'll be doing our best. And by the way, there'll be exit interviews from the official visit weekend happening on Sunday too. So a lot going on, a lot to follow over at lions247.com. And you put in some work also on the basketball recruiting angle this week with some things developing. I wanted to finish there because I wanted to make sure those who are interested in that, and I know it's football recruiting season right now, that's the big deal. But Mike Rhodes and company putting in work, have some opportunities. What do we need to know about what's brewing with basketball right now?
Right now, you're kind of on the heels of the offseason where Penn State put together a really strong transfer portal class that is going to have the chance to make a real impact in year 2 of the Rhodes era. Now the focus kind of shifts back to high school recruiting. That's where Mike Rhodes wants the lifeblood of his program to be, through high school recruiting. You saw that come together during the 2024 cycle. Or 2025 cycle, excuse me, with or 2024, no, what am I saying? The 2024 cycle with a top 25 class, which, I mean, at Penn State, right off the bat, to bring in a top 25 class, says a lot about your recruiting ability as a staff. So Penn State basketball heading in the right direction on the recruiting trail. They've got an official visit locked in with Caden Mingo, who is a top 100 point guard from New York. It sounds like they're going to get an official visit from Cam Ward, who was a top 100 prospect from Maryland. Both of those guys really high on the Penn State board. Jamal Brunt has been working really hard on Ward as a DMV product. Mingo's a little bit newer of a target. He didn't pick up his offer until April, but he's really liking Penn State. He's been studying Ace Baldwin's role in Penn State's offense, seeing how Mike Rhodes lets his point guards loose and lets them work. It's something he has praised on the record, and he's going to be getting to town for an official visit during the weekend of September 7th. If all goes well there, maybe Penn State has a point guard of the future. There have been some new offers issued in the 2025 class as well. Couple notable guys on that front. Still some guys who are kind of in the process of blowing up on the AAU circuit, so we're going to have to see where things stand with them coming out of these final evaluation periods. But you're starting to see some more movement with Penn State basketball on the recruiting trail right now. It was around this time last year the Nittany Lions landed their first 2024 commit in Javen Carter, and that kind of got the ball rolling from that point on. Could that happen again soon? I'm not sure. Carter was a little bit of a surprise in his own right last cycle. Maybe we got another one coming on.
And if you stuck around for the basketball recruiting update, I'll let you know that Daniel Gallen today on Thursday at Lions247.com has a write-up on Coach Rhodes' evaluation of all the transfer portal pickups, which is going to be a really important class again for Penn State. You'll find that write-up over at Lions247.com. Mr. Calvaruso, I'll be seeing you on campus very soon. We got some work to do. You've been killing it, and you've been crushing it during this extremely important month of June. And feels like we've been 2 weeks into it. We're only 6 days into it, but we'll keep at it at Lions247.com. Thanks for hopping on with me, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.
All right, Tyler Calvaruso will be in town. The Lions 24/7 crew will be on the camp circuit once again. Check out our coverage at Lions247.com throughout the weekend, and then coming out of the weekend as we get reaction and feedback from these official visits. Perhaps we'll see the class grow. We're going to start to see a lot of movement in the month of June, if that hasn't been already made clear through Tyler Calvaruso's updates here at Lions 24/7 podcast. For now, stepping aside, I am Tyler Donahue. We'll talk to you real soon right here on the Lions 24/7 podcast.